Welcome, everybody, to our Lift Up Women in Life Sciences live broadcast. And we are back again this month. We're celebrating International Women's Day and month with the global topic of Give to Gain, Stronger Together. And I've got a phenomenal panel of experienced life science leaders that are going to be joining me today to talk about this really important topic. But for those of you that have perhaps never dialed into a Lift Up Live before, let me tell you a little bit about it. So, I work for Fraser Dove International, an executive search life sciences talent consultancy. And around 3 years ago now, in 2022, we decided as a group of ambassadors internally, we thought, what can we do to give back to the industry? We realized we had a number of senior leadership level women relationships and network across the globe, spanning right across the vertical markets within life sciences. And we thought, let's bring this community together and let's get them sharing on live broadcasts their experiences, their career challenges, hurdles, to really effectively connect, inspire, and champion, which is our Lift Up mission, women across the globe from academia all the way through to C-suite. So it's been a privilege to be a part of this journey. It's been a good three and a half years now. We've had over 100 key speakers. We've had over 170,000 global views now, which has been phenomenal. And thank you to everybody that has dialed in and signed up today. We often get up to 4,000 people rewatch every one of our live broadcasts. So make sure that you spread the word, post this live broadcast today to rewatch. But without further ado, I'll do a very quick introduction into myself before I bring in the key speakers. But I am Louise Williams. I'm in staffing now for about 20 years, life sciences for the past 11 years. I joined here on operations on the board, and I'm now the MD, and I oversee customer success, key accounts, and obviously take great pride in supporting this Lift Up community group. So without further ado, I'm going to bring in Ayse, who's going to do her own introduction for me. Lovely to have you here today.
Thank you, Louise. Thank you. It's a pleasure for me to be here in this month, especially with the Give to Gain theme. Let me introduce myself briefly. My name is Ayse. I'm 45 years old, a chemical engineer by profession. I've been in the pharmaceutical industry for 22 years now. Started out in Istanbul, and then my career took me around the world, in the US, Switzerland, Belgium, Greece, and happily, after 13 years abroad, I'm now back to my home country, and currently I'm working as the head of quality management system and digital quality assurance at Arcera. But I have a dual role now. I stepped into to head the quality assurance function in the company recently, and I have to mention my husband, because who has really supported me around the world throughout my career. So I couldn't, have this introduction without mentioning him. And on a personal level, I have 3 cats. I'm a certified well-being coach. I'm a certified life coach. I'm a certified Pilates instructor. So I have a lot of extracurricular activities. And really passionate about well-being and sport. So that's I am.
Excellent. Thank you so much for the introduction. And we've got Jessica joining us here. If you could do an intro for the audience as well, please.
Sure. Thanks, Louise. Yeah, so Jessica Keliher, I am an HR executive and leadership coach with over 20 years of experience. 15 of those years I've spent in the life sciences industry, and I've worked in rare disease, vaccines, and cell therapy. I'm currently a fractional CHRO and, of course, a huge advocate for love and kindness in leadership and at work. I'm a mom of 2 young girls, and so this topic is very near and dear to my heart, and I'm just so grateful to be part of the panel today. Thanks.
Thank you, Jessica. Lovely to have you here as well. And certainly not last but not least, we've got Paula. If you could do your introduction for us.
Louise, thank you for having me join Paula Soteropoulos. It's great to be here. I am a biotech professional for 35 years. I have been focused originally my career in operations, currently serving on boards and investing, but I spent my first 21 years at Genzyme in various roles there, leading business units, went on to companies like Moderna, and then founded and led my first company as CEO of Therapeutics, which I took public. I got 2 rare disease drugs approved and grew that company globally, and also then launched my second company, in Soma, where I led initially, and now I'm chairman of the board there. So today, working to support companies as they grow, in terms of boards and starting up new companies. I am a mother of one who is already married, is a doctor. Also have a very supportive husband who was instrumental in my journey throughout my career as well. I have most of my years been focused on things like rare disease, but lately in the past few years, I've been very turning my attention to women's health, and really where I can put a lot of energy and attention there and make a difference for conditions that women have and that are underserved today. So thanks again for having me.
Oh, lovely. Thank you, Paula. And what an inspirational panel. I feel like we've got a lovely blend here from kind of HR executive, quality systems, and then obviously a biotech CEO. So thank you so much for joining us today. I'm really excited about this topic. So yeah, if you're new dialing into these live broadcasts, what we love to see is people building their network. Okay, that's what Lift Up's all about. So pop it into the comments where it is you're dialing in from, what function area within life sciences that you sit within. It's great for everybody to get connected. And what I'd also encourage as well, we want this to be as an interactive broadcast as possible. So we've got some great questions that have already come through the community. But as we move throughout the live broadcast, if you've got any questions, then pop in a queue into the comments at the front of your question, just so it's easier for me to navigate and pull it out. And I'll try and bring it up on screen and share it with the group. So without further ado, let's kick off with our first question. And it feels only fitting, right, to ask you all, what does give to gain mean to you in your own careers? And I'm going to come to you first, Jessica, with this question.
Yeah, so I think it means a lot, actually. But for me, the giving part is the real flex, right? And really, it's just something that genuinely brings me a lot of joy. So seeing someone step into their potential, watching a culture shift, knowing that something that I did made someone's working life better, that's the reward. And so I do it necessarily for it to come back to me. I don't do it for the gain, right? It's all about the giving. But you know, the paradox, right, is that when you give freely and fully, it always has this way of coming back to you anyway, not because you chased it, but just because you put that energy out into the world. And that's, you know, what I always try to live. So giving is just deeply woven into who I am and how I practice HR. And so I think, you know, sort of a real life example of that, right, is if you're, you know, leading any type of transformation in an organization, something that fundamentally creates, you know, moments that are changing people's lives, that is something that I'm really passionate about. And being able to be a part of that has changed me as a leader, has changed me in terms of how I work and how I see the world and how I show up in the world. And so the giving is the flex, and through giving, you gain. So I think that's what it means for me.
Beautifully said. Yeah, thank you for sharing that, Jessica. And Paula, I'll come to you with the same question. What's your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm going to sound repetitive to what you said, because it really is the giving that I have felt gives the most meaningful parts of my career. Really investing in others, building those trust-based relationships. Those compound over time, and so you get back just based on those relationships. But again, I just, as Jessica said, I don't give my time, my effort into helping people because I'm going to get something back. It really gives me purpose. And I have to say, we're also lucky and blessed to be in an industry where I think we all feel that what we do has purpose, and especially with health. For patients, and it's making a difference. And that giving isn't because, again, we're getting something back. It really, that purpose drives us and motivates us. So it really is just, I think, a cornerstone of why we do what we do every day, and also bringing back those meaningful moments when you look back and say, wow, that person, I was able to help them even in a small way, and look at them shine on their own now. That's very rewarding.
Yeah, I love that. I think what comes to mind when you were speaking then was authenticity. You know, it has to come from almost an authentic place, doesn't it? Like you said, you're not purposely going out there because you want to gain something. It's because you genuinely care about people. And I think that being in an industry 100% that has that sense of purpose as well, being purpose-led, it kind of all knits itself very well together. Ayse, have you got any comments in regards to this question as well? What's your thoughts?
I can only echo what Jessica and Paula said. And what I want to add from my side is also taking chance or risk on people. I have had throughout my career cases where I wanted to hire somebody who really didn't have any experience in the area, but I saw, that passion in the way they speak, in their eyes, and then I said, okay, I'm gonna bet on this person. So I'm the one taking the chance, taking the risk, and then people were telling me, HR, people were against me hiring this person. I said, okay, I take the responsibility. I'm gonna do it, and then so. In these cases, when you take a bet on somebody and then you support them and then you saw them, you see them grow and flourish, and then people come to you and then say, you know what, you were right. So that's very that's very fulfilling. That's
no, that's a very interesting thought process actually, because I read some statistics not long ago where they were saying that some of our male counterparts can often get progressed or developed or maybe even sponsored because of the potential that they get seen in them. As for women, it's kind of like they would have had to have been there and done that before. That's only a statistic, and not necessarily saying I've seen that in real life take place. Have you?
I've seen
okay.
Yes.
But it was quite an interesting statistic how I saw that, and we're going to touch upon mentorship and sponsorship later on in the broadcast, but that also comes to mind. And just coming back to the Give to Gain from a leadership perspective, just something that we use a lot of language internally here at Fraser Dove is EQ, IQ, CQ. We've spent years talking about IQ. We've recently talked more a little bit about EQ. Now we're talking about CQ, change management. But ultimately, it's kind of having as a leader that empathetic leadership skills, just caring about the people in which you manage, which, CHRO, Jessica, I guess you see that across all the teams, right, in terms of which you're building, but having that authentic want to give, to naturally just help. And the gain, if it comes, it's great. If it doesn't, you're going to do it anyway. It's just a really nice mindset. So yeah, thank you for sharing that. So another question here is, can you share a moment where someone gave you an opportunity that changed your career? If you look back, is there a pivotal moment, I guess, in your life where you've thought, actually, that's really just taking me onto a new trajectory? I'll come to you, Jessica, with this one.
Yeah. And of course, I'm fortunate enough to have had a couple examples of this throughout my career, just people who believed in me. But I think one that stands out to me right now is the culture transformation work that I led at a company called Leading Biosciences. But also the thing is like I also created this opportunity for myself. It wasn't necessarily given. But, I went to the CEO and I just flat out, asked him, is, transforming our corporate culture a business decision that we want to commit to? And, of course, he wasn't going to tell me no, but it did take courage for me to ask him, right, and to be so bold and to get his advocacy for the work that I wanted to do. And so when he said yes, that was, of course, an act of real sponsorship. And he didn't give me the project. He gave me his trust. Right. He gave me the room to do something really meaningful. And when someone in that position backs you that fully, it changes what you believe is possible in yourself.
Yeah, I love that.
And so, my lesson from that moment is sometimes you have to create your own opportunities. Don't wait for it to be handed to you, but
yeah, absolutely. Very true. Sort of stepping into the unknown and putting your voice out there is just really important, as opposed to, like you say, sitting back and waiting for it to happen maybe. And Ayse, what's your thoughts on this question?
For me, I had several of those, but I think the most pivotal one was when I was only 3 years into my career. The female leader who hired me into the pharmaceutical company, she asked me to take over a team, a responsibility of like 10 people. I was 26 years old only, and it's a critical role in a pharmaceutical manufacturing site, and everybody on the team is older than me. On paper, they have more experience, and then I think a lot of people were not so happy about it, or she knows her, and then she just put her in this role. So it meant for me a lot of hard work,
Yeah.
but also dedication and loyalty. And then I'm happy that there were times that I had to accept I don't know, and it was not easy to accept that I didn't know, because I thought that I had to know everything, I had to have all the answers. But that taught me that early on that it's okay that I don't have everything figured out, but we are
All the
gonna
answers.
figure it all together. And that, I think, her trust and putting me on the spot in a positive sense and giving me the opportunities, making me exposed and visible in the global. It was a big pharma in the global company, which led me to taking an international assignment, a talent development program that took me around the world. So that was really pivotal.
Yeah.
Not everyone, but that, I think
That was the
that has changed the whole career journey I had. Definitely.
Yeah, I love that. And that's effectively, she's been an advocate. She's sponsored you in that regard, which is fantastic as well, to give you that platform. And Paula, how about you? Same question.
Yeah, I've had several, and all of the defining ones I would say were when someone advocated for me for an opportunity that I didn't even know about. And each one was a very different role from what I was doing prior. But one example, I'd say I'd probably bring one from early in my career because it really changed the trajectory, is when I was at Genzyme. I was initially focused on engineering and manufacturing when I was there. That was my original background. And I used to catch up with our VP of operations, he was openly a mentor, and we would get together every so often. He was a few levels above me. And I openly shared that I wanted to get closer to our why as a company, what drives the business, get closer to patient impact. I felt where I was in a more of a service role is really far from that why. And we had just acquired a company, and they needed someone to lead operations that was reporting into the business unit. I didn't even know about this. And he put my name forward and advocated for me. And again, I wouldn't have even thought of the ability to move over into a business unit from an engineering background. And so it was a transformational point, because it was a role that took me out of that linear growth path to a much broader trajectory, because I was now sitting at the table on a leadership team that was a business unit, and I was exposed to decisions around clinical development, commercialization, business development, in addition to my direct role leading operations. So it was that jumping off point where then subsequently I was then leading a business unit. I then was able to become a CEO. And I just never would have even thought that I could do that role. I wouldn't even raise my hand if it came up. So it was really him put my name in, being again more of a mentor, but really sponsoring me. But for on my part, I will have to say, the lesson learned is the fact that I had put my general vision out there on what I wanted to do, helped him actually see what the points were. So I think a couple lessons on there but that is one that I
love
very
that.
pivotal with me.
Yeah, no, thank you for sharing that. And I think that it's probably a bit of a wise time to maybe just jump into the whole mentorship and sponsorship piece. We get asked quite a lot as to, well, what's the real differences between the two? How would you define the differences, Jessica, from your perspective?
Yeah, I do think there's an important distinction here that sometimes does get lost, because a mentor really gives you their time, their wisdom, their guidance. A sponsor does something that's a little bit more than that. They put their name and their reputation behind you, right? It's like they're advocating for you in rooms that you're not in. They're opening the doors.
Yeah.
And there's, like you said, there's fascinating research about this that shows that women tend to accumulate a lot of mentors, but not sponsors.
Yeah.
And I think that comes down to self-advocacy. I think women are generally very open to seeking help and being committed to growth, but asking for things and advocating for themselves is maybe historically something that's not been a welcomed behavior from women in our society. So we seek guidance rather than opportunity.
Yes.
And so we see those gaps. But I've been lucky enough to have both mentors and sponsors throughout my career, men and women. But the sponsor or the person who comes to mind most powerfully is the former CHRO at Novavax, who I actually worked for her twice throughout my career. I've known her for a really long time, and she was both a mentor and a sponsor. And so when I was on her team, or when I wasn't on her team, she would always take my phone calls. She would always, let me pick her brain about projects that I was working on, or things I was considering doing with my career. And so that was mentorship.
Yeah.
But when I returned to work for her for the second time, that was when my career truly catapulted. The growth I experienced during that period, I couldn't have achieved without her sponsorship. And so it wasn't about her advising me, it was about her truly backing me up.
Yeah.
And, perhaps the most powerful thing she did in terms of sponsoring me is she was preparing to retire. She made sure to position me in the best possible way for my future outcomes. Even though she wasn't going to be there to see any of it, she had nothing to gain from doing that, but she did it purely because she believed in me. And that is true sponsorship.
Yeah. Wow. Well, great example and very well defined. I mean, mentors help prepare you, guide you, but the sponsors are there to promote you. And I love that to advocate for you in a room that you're not in is absolutely spot on. Ayse, with this comment in mind, I guess, why does it matter? If we go to the tail end of this question, so why does it matter? But what do you think maybe women could be doing more from an advice perspective, moving on to ensure that they are being maybe more sponsored than they are being more mentored? What's your thoughts with that?
I think, okay, to get mentors is easier than having sponsorships, and women naturally they're not more into showcasing or showing off, right? They expect, okay, I'm gonna do a good job, and then someone will see me, and then they will recognize me. I think that was the case also for me. So I'm just focusing on doing a good job, and then I'll get what I deserve in the end, but not really putting a lot of effort into networking, maybe. So it happened naturally. I was in a big pharma, so that was easy, but it was always difficult for me. Hey, I'm here and I did this and that. So that wasn't natural. So I think there's probably women are less outgoing in that sense, but there's also perhaps cultural, depending on the society you're from, there's also differences. So in Turkey, for me, it wasn't so easy that, hey, I'm here, I want to connect, and then so I couldn't just reach out to people. Hi, Louise, how are you? I'm this and that, and can we connect? So that wasn't easy and natural for me. So but they can come out of that closet and then feel, what's the worst thing that can happen anyway if they try to reach out and build connections, and in the end, if they don't get it.
Yeah, I think you've hit the nail on the head with the focusing on the impact and positive impact of networking and building relationships. I think LinkedIn, actually, not that I'm an ad sponsor for LinkedIn, but I think you've seen over the last 5 years since COVID, the great impact it's had just building networks, relationships. 10 years ago, 15 years ago, people were sitting there around 500 connections or 1,000 connections. Nowadays, people have got 10,000, 20,000, 50,000. And I hope she doesn't mind me dropping her name in this, but we've got Emma Timsley, who was CEO of Weatherden, and she was on our last broadcast in February. She became a CEO of a biotech in, I think, either late 20s or mid 30s. But she said she would have only really got there, or one of the main reasons why she got there, was because of the phenomenal network she had in different places and different people that then advocated for her. So any advice to anybody that is looking to transition into a new career or role or progress, develop, go and build a network with like-minded people that can share experiences and help you guide. Paula, any thoughts from you in regards to what women could maybe do to just try and be more sponsored moving forward as opposed to just mentored?
Yeah, maybe because I agree with everything that's been said, but just maybe to build on a different nuance of it. And if I look back at my career, I have been very lucky to have very strong mentors and sponsors. But a lot of, if I think of the sponsorship, is how did I get that? It also is that I had to actually be out there a little bit more and be exposed to people that would not have otherwise seen me in action. And because that's, you start to build a base of, either trust or people know what you're capable of. So as an example, early in my career at Genzyme, I would take on roles that may not necessarily have been in what, or I would say projects, for example. I would just take on extra projects that would be a little outside of my realm of responsibility, gave me exposure to doing different things, but also showed that I had capabilities beyond my responsibility. It's easier to do that when you're in an existing company. Someone has trust in you that says, okay, we'll let you get involved in this, even though you don't have that direct responsibility. And it allowed, I think, people to see that I had different capabilities, and so that they could make that leap to take a risk or to take a, give me a stretch role. At Genzyme specifically, we were very lucky to have had an amazing leader in Henry Tamir, who was the late CEO there, and he had been an amazing mentor to many people. But I don't think he had time to sponsor everybody. And I was very lucky that he did with me. And I had very early exposure to him because of certain projects that I took on. And he had told me later that a lot of it was he had seen how I could, push back and stand up for myself, and things that he was challenging me. And so he became far more active in my career. There was a point in time where he said, you could be a general manager. And my first reaction was, well, I don't have a business degree. He said, you don't need that. You've had more than enough experience from what I've seen on the job. You can run a business, you can run a global P&L, and let's get you into a place where you can take one of those on. And so that's where, that sponsorship really started. But he had seen me in these other instances.
Different projects.
So long story short, I'm saying is I think you have to also use the opportunity in an organization that you're at is to get on projects and just stretch your responsibilities, because it is about the outside network. The people that you're working with are the ones who are going to give you something, take a little bit more risk than someone who's on the outside who doesn't know you well enough.
Yeah, I love that. And it's amazing how the industry and careers have changed, right, from 10, 15 years ago, where, the saying was, you've got the career ladder, and if you want to get there, you've got to go up that ladder, and you've got to go up the vertical line, so to speak. There's a lady in the US, I think her name's Lynn Sullivan. It still sits with me. About 2 years ago, she said, life is like a jungle gym. Like a career is like a jungle gym. It's like the more areas in which you can grasp onto, you can, even if it's a case of sometimes what on paper, taking a sidestep in level or role into a different area. Lady, I'm sure I get on with her very well, Heather Moses at AstraZeneca. She spent, she's an MD. She spent all her career in med affairs and on the physician's medical side. And she's just now landed and taken on a commercial role within AstraZeneca as a commercial leader, because she sees that having that breadth and depth of experience now to continue that career is super important. But I love that. So key takeaways here is kind of for women to focus on impact, maybe not just the effort, take risks, jump into some projects, put their names out there, step outside of their comfort zone, build relationships, share intentions early, maybe when they're coming in. This is what I'd love to do. This is where I'd love to be. Highlight outcomes, not just activity. Share wins and don't apologize for it. I think that's a little bit of a female trait sometimes, is putting ourselves out there and celebrating the success, and tie the work to business results is something that comes to mind. So hopefully there's some really good key takeaways there for everybody listening. So what have I got here that's come through? I've got, why do you think women supporting women is still such an important topic? Do you find that in the industry you see that enough in the workplaces that you've been in? Jessica, what's your thoughts? Do you see that happening enough?
Yes, there could be more of it. I think it's changing, though. I don't think we saw as much of it, but I think that is changing as the sort of generation shift a little bit. It's I will say for myself, I came into the executive ranks very young. And so, we oftentimes as women, we sit in rooms where we are the only woman. We sit at tables where we are the only woman. And I think, my experience also being by a long shot the youngest person in the room, by a long shot the least experienced person in the room. I think my experience of being the only woman in the room was just sort of like, it was exacerbated by some of these other things. But I think something that, I oftentimes just wonder about too, and this is, maybe a touchy subject, but I think, our nervous system is hardwired to seek safety, right? And sometimes being the only woman sitting in a room full of men, triggers our nervous systems, right? And there's nothing we can do about that. It's not to say that anybody in that room has ever done anything wrong in their entire lives. It's simply biology. And so I think we don't talk about that enough. We don't talk about the impact that has on the way that we may show up in these moments.
It's where imposter syndrome can sort of
It
creep
can
in a little
sneak
bit as
in,
well,
yeah,
can't
because
it? Yeah.
you do sometimes just have this fear that sits there with no real reason or knowing why it sits there. You're in that room for a reason. You've earned your place there, right? You're
Yeah.
there because they trust you to do your job and to do it well, and you have something to offer to help the business, prosper. But sometimes these things creep in, and I think we don't talk about that enough.
Yeah.
But I will say that, being a woman who was the only woman, but also being a woman who has sat in the room with other women, there is a remarkable difference when you're not the only one there,
Yeah.
right? It feels a lot different. And for myself, I can say, like, I know when there's another woman in the room, I just feel a little more confident. I
Yeah.
feel a little more willing to speak freely. And so I
Oh,
do think that women continuing to support other women is really important, to welcome
yeah.
women into those rooms,
Yes.
along with them, because I think that's where we can bring our true gifts
Yeah.
more fully.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I love that. I love that. Something that's just come to mind, which I hadn't necessarily thought about sharing, but there was there's a female who leads a kind of community group, and she asked me to join a roundtable lunch in London. This was last year in June, I think it was. Anyway, I turned up. Amazing restaurant, amazing place. Sat around the table. Every person that came in was a male. We all sat around the table. There must have been about 14 of us. And I was just, like, I've been doing what I'm doing for a while. I'm confident. And as you've just said, I've had moments of imposter syndrome in the past, don't get me wrong, but I've kind of learned ways now where it's kind of like, no, I understand what I'm talking about. I'm prepared for this conversation. It's fine. But I got contacted a few days afterwards by the host saying, oh, one of the gentlemen came up to me and thought you were my assistant. Didn't understand why he was sitting around the table. So I was like, oh, interesting. Okay, we're still there.
Yep.
So it's we've come a long way. Don't get me wrong. I think we've come a long way as an industry. But there's definitely still moments where that's very evident, and that dynamic is still, can be quite an uncomfortable one completely in that setting. But as you've said, it's about having confidence, knowing why it is that you're there, and having a voice, not being afraid to speak up. So yeah, love that. Thank you for sharing. And Paula, have you got any thoughts in regards to this?
Yeah, I do agree that we've probably come a long way, but we still need women supporting women. It's
Yeah.
a fact that we need that intentional advocacy. We need to shift the composition of leadership and who's around the table. And I'll give you an example. I'm part of the Biotech CEO Sisterhood. This is a group
Yeah.
of CEOs that have come together. When I was a first-time CEO, I was trying to bring a lunch together of as many female CEOs I could find. I struggled to bring in together 12. It was crazy. And now that sisterhood is well over 300 female CEOs.
Yeah.
It is. And the support, it's amazing because we share best practices, connections, board seat opportunities, talent. Yeah. But more importantly, everybody lifts each other up. We celebrate the wins. And some of it also is just to have a safe place to have a conversation about what it means to be human as you're leading in a sometimes very lonely position as a CEO. You can't go to your chairman of the board. But then the other side of it is that support is so critical too, to really get more women into, let's say, the CEO or any C-level role. If you look back the past couple of years, specifically in biotech, there's an overwhelming amount of exits that have been led by female CEOs, and many of those as first-time CEOs. We saw one this week, another one, and so there's a lot that is just shifting in terms of how we're seeing leadership from women, but there's still far more that needs to be done to continue to support that next generation, because I don't see enough of the pipeline, let's say, getting into C-level roles in general. We just need to do more to lift more women
to encourage that.
Yeah,
completely. I love that. Anything to add to that, Ayse, before we jump? Because we've got quite a few people in the network that have just been dialing in that I thought I should probably bring up.
I think nothing much to add. Definitely it's important, because I have first of all, I have lived it firsthand. The story I was telling you. So I was actually sponsored by a female leadership. I've been lucky because perhaps pharmaceutical industry is a bit privileged compared to many others where there's a lot more women, in the workforce. And so I have been lucky throughout my career that in most of the teams there was more women than actually men. So that was good. There was one case where I was at part of the executive team, and everybody else was men, and I really felt. Also, there was in the specific country cultural, hierarchical expectations or dynamics, and there I felt like I had to put more in to feel that I'm heard, that they expect that I'm present, that I'm respected. So that was tough.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you've got different geographical, political challenges. You've got cultural challenges in different continents. You've got different industry streams have the different gender balances, like you said, the CDMO, potentially the biotech, probably more male orientated versus your pharmaceutical. So there's a number, isn't there, of hurdles that that can be challenging, and it's just having a group and a support network around you that can be so beneficial in that regard. Just jumping in quickly, because I just want to say hi to Sam from Ireland. She's dialing in. Thank you for joining us today. We got Viviana from the US, Digital Marketing Communications Biotech. You might know Viviana.
I know her.
We've got Josh dialing in from Berkshire here, Georgina from Zurich, Switzerland. Thank you. Annabelle as well from the UK. Chris from Boston, and a huge beneficiary of some of Paula's gifts, where I got the immense privilege to learn from her. Oh, I love that. That's nice. Yeah, we've got a lot more coming through. I might not be able to get through them all, but Basel, Switzerland, thanks so much for joining here. Anna, Alison as well from Cambridge. Lexi, I was only talking to you the other day, Lexi, on InMail. Lovely to join us today. Thank you. We've got Rasha from Oregon. Yeah, so thank you so much for joining. If you've got any questions, just pop them in to the comments with a Q in front, just so I can pop them up. But we seem to be whistling through some of this. So what have I got here? Maybe one to sort of land on as we come to an end is, what's one small action do you think that people can take this month now, and obviously moving forward, but bearing in mind it's International Women's Month, that they can change as a mindset or a behavior? Any thoughts there, Jessica?
Yeah, I think the thing that comes to mind is really just like so simple, but like just taking that moment every day, or like whenever you're thinking about somebody, just to reach out, like a quick, hey, I'm thinking about you, hope you're doing awesome. Just so it's sort of sowing, like continuing to sow into people, I think it's just really important. Them receiving that text message from you completely unexpected is going to make them feel great. They're going to remember that. And I think it's really all, at the end of the day, it's all about relationships, giving into and sowing into these relationships. It always comes back in leaps and bounds. So I would say just text somebody today and tell them you're thinking about them.
Ah, lovely. Paula, what are your thoughts here?
I think if you
similar.
actually, well, but think of one person and actually advocate for them by just doing an introduction, recommending them or elevating them. Just even if you can think of one person that you could do that for, I think would be huge.
Yeah, lovely. Yeah, reach out to somebody, get connected, advocate for somebody, that one person. I love that. And Ayse, any thoughts with this question?
I think similar. Tell them that you believe in them, and that also tell them that it's okay to be vulnerable, to show emotions. We are not robots; we are humans. In the end of the day. But for a long time, I thought I cannot show emotions. I have to be this firm and tough lady that the emotions are for after hours. So and no. So I think to give them that psychological safety to
Love that.
be
Yeah.
their authentic selves.
Yeah, I think that's actually a really important point that you've touched on there. And, working in leadership hiring, we've seen so many confidential searches and positions come up in the last 24 months specifically, where current organizations are evaluating their leadership teams, not only to say to themselves, are these individuals capable of the business transformation that we're about to undergo? Can they create followership with the teams that they've got in place? Can they take us to this next journey? But equally, in order to create followership, they have to have empathy. They have to understand people, show vulnerability, listen to their team. So I just think what you've said there actually really resonated with those conversations I've been having. So we're going to last not least question down here, which funny enough, I've asked for about the last 3.5 years. At the end of every live broadcast, I've said to people, if you had to give one piece of advice for the next generation of women entering leadership roles, what would it be? And that could be anything outside even Give to Gain, just anything generally. What would your thoughts be there, Jessica?
Yeah, I think my advice is simple, but maybe not as easily done. And that is to just be true to yourself, even when it's not popular.
Yeah.
And again, I know this can be hard because it's easy to lose yourself in the corporate world. It really is. The politics, the games, the pressure to perform. It's easy to become a version of yourself that you don't recognize, unfortunately. And I'm sure we've all felt that pull at points, throughout our career. But for every young woman entering leadership, I would just really encourage her to get very clear on who you are, what you stand for, what you value, and pursue it relentlessly, because everything else is noise and it should be treated as such. This world doesn't need more leaders who are playing games. It needs authenticity and kindness. And I would encourage everyone to weave that into their leadership identity as
identity.
Power.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's very, very well said. Like a true CHRO, I think that I think that the authenticity piece, but the value bit was important. I speak to a lot of people that sometimes I say to them, just make sure when you're moving on, when you're considering opportunities, you're really working for an organization that, has that sense of purpose that you resonate with, but is value led in a way in which resonates with you. Because testing your values, morphing into a style or people or an environment that you don't then feel comfortable in doesn't end up boding well. So I think I completely agree with you there. That was really well said. And Paula, same question to you. What's your one piece of advice?
Yeah, we've said it a few times, and you just said it now, is authenticity is a huge piece for me. It was something that took me some time early in my career to learn, because I started more coming on with that armor, and putting up a front of how I should show up and what leadership should mean, as opposed to, being true. And it was actually Henry Tremere who at one point on a one-on-one said to me, when we one-on-one, I see the authentic you, but when you're presenting to a bunch of leaders, you put on this mask and you're a different person. And it was the first time someone gave me that permission to be myself. And over time, I realized that's where you get the followership that you mentioned, that people they build trust when they know who you are as leader. So I think you can't be afraid. I mean, and you have to balance. I think that sharing who you are, what's meaningful for you, also sharing the things that maybe even personal issues that you may be going through, with not in a way of too much sharing, but to allow other women or other even men to know that, you know, yes, you
You're
can
human.
still, yeah, you're human. You can do a great job. You can kick butt and get things done, but you're balancing so much going on. And that was for me something that I realized I was doing a disservice to other women when I wasn't sharing, because I went through health issues. I was dealing with a mom with Alzheimer's, and I wasn't sharing, and people were like, oh, wow, she's got it all together. Well, no, I didn't. And I think being more open about that, I think, will help bring your team closer, create that loyalty, and also know that they have room to actually talk to you about what's going on with them, and they'll just do a much greater job. So those are some of the things.
Completely agree. I love that's how you get authentic followership. People want to follow you, as opposed to feeling like they're forced because you're their manager or their director. I completely agree. And Ayse, what's your thoughts with this question?
I strongly echo what was said, but I want to approach it from a different perspective. Women tend to disproportionately give and deplete themselves. So my one piece of advice would be, first give yourself, fill your cup, so let it overflow, so you can give, and then when you give, it doesn't diminish you, or it doesn't exhaust you. So take also good care of yourself. It starts with you.
Yeah, I love that. It's very well said. And I did a live broadcast about a year or so ago now on how to burn bright without burning out. Because, you know, I think, there was a time, certainly the 12 months post COVID, when the market just went a bit boom, and, you know, people in global roles were, you know, working hours around the clock, and if they're in, you know, global positions, feeling like they had to respond at silly hours at night, but, you know, and it's kind of understanding your boundaries. So when you're entering a leadership role, understanding your boundaries, not feeling like, you know, you have to work at that 120% consistently, and just looking after yourself. I think that's very well said. Well, I think that's it. We've literally gone 2 minutes over, but that flew by. And thank you so much for all of your thoughts, your perspectives. You know, really enlightening, and great to hear that whilst there's kind of the synergy between you all, actually you're all looking at it as well from your own personal points of view, which is really important. So yes, for those of you that haven't logged into our community group, get connected. We've got, you know, a few thousand there in terms of the community group. You'll also see when our next live broadcast is up and running. This will obviously be available to anybody that wants to forward it on to colleagues, associates, friends, post going live. And yes, we'll be back next month. But thank you so much to the key speakers and for everybody joining us today. It's been a pleasure. Take care. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.